Hello and welcome. Today we're going to look at how to actually prepare a solution of known volume and known molarity. In a previous video, I showed you the calculations necessary to determine the amount of sodium chloride that was needed to produce 200 milliliters of a 0.600 molar solution, and we determined that to be 7.01 grams of NaCl. So what we're going to do in this video is go on and look at how we would actually prep that 200 milliliters of solution. So in this, the chemicals that we're going to be using are, of course, sodium chloride, that is our solute, and then water, our solvent. As far as lab equipment, we're going to be using an electric balance, a weighing boat, a 100 milliliter volumetric flask with either a cap or parafilm, and then a 250 milliliter beaker and a scupula. Okay? So let's go on and look at some of this equipment. First off, our sodium chloride is in a stock bottle. You never want to take something out of the stock bottle and then put it back in. So when we mass things out, we want to be careful about how much we're getting at each time that we scoop into it, so that we don't end up with a lot of excess that we then have to dispose of in a disposable container. Okay. The reason we don't put it back into the stock container is because that can end up contaminating whatever your stock is. Okay. Then we have, again, our weighing boat. This is going to go onto our balance. And this is what we're going to put the salt into. Our volumetric flask. We've got a 100 milliliter. And the thing about volumetric flasks is they have a marking on it. And when your meniscus is sitting at that mark, you know you have exactly the volume that is in that volumetric flask. This particular model comes with a cap that we can put on there. So once we've got our solution here, we can tilt it and tip it and kind of shake it gently to get everything mixed up without worrying about it coming out. If yours does not have a cap, then you can use something called parafilm, which is just a waxy film that you can stretch and then place that over the mouth of that volumetric flask, wrap it around, and you press it down and it kind of heat seals that, and then you can do the same type of thing. There are also some models of volumetric flasks that have a ground glass stopper in it and a ground glass top. So for these, you put the stopper in, give it a slight little twist, and it holds tight. And then again, you would keep your finger over the top of it. You can shake this, etc. And whenever you're ready to remove that, because it won't just lift out, you give it another slight little twist, and it lifts right out. Okay. So very quickly, the reason we are not using the graduated cylinder is these are not accurate. You never want to use a graduated cylinder for preparing a solution. This particular model is plus or minus 5%. So if it's a 100 milliliter graduated cylinder, that measurement when the meniscus is sitting at 100 could be 5% off from that. So in other words, it could be anywhere from 95 milliliters up to 105 milliliters. So we don't ever use a graduated cylinder for preparing exact amount. Same thing for a beaker. This beaker is plus or minus 5%. Beakers are just storage or where you're going to do reactions. Or in this particular case, we're going to put in approximately 100 milliliters and then use a volumetric flask for the exact measurement. Okay. Then we've got our scupula. Okay. So let's see how this procedure is actually done. Okay. So first thing, I've got my balance. I've already got it zeroed out. Okay. There is this little zero or a tear button. And then we're going to take our weighing dish and set it onto that balance. You can see that it now reached 2.2 grams. And we do want this done in terms of grams. And I can zero that out. And now the mass of the weighing dish is no longer included. I then can take my salt and I can start adding that salt to that weighing dish until I get to the required mass. So I'm up to 6 grams. So now I'm going to get a little bit less on there. 6.5. That's hard to see because of the glare from overhead. And then as I get closer, we can tap this scupula, just the camera angle for you. And what we would do is just lightly tap on the side of it, and just a few granules come off. So now I've got my 7 grams. This balance only masses to the 10th place. So I'm not going to be able to get that 0.1. That excess salt in the scupula then goes into a disposal container. I do not put it back into my stock container. Okay. Now that I've got my 7 grams of salt, I can take this. And the nice thing about weighing dishes is you can take them and fold them up. So I can take this, my 100 milliliter volumetric flask, and use it to pour that in as such. And now what I've got as I adjust this camera out is I have my salt within my 100 milliliter volumetric flask, at which point now what I can do is start adding in my water. And we're going to use a wash bottle for this process. So start putting in my water, and simply squeezing the wash bottle can take a while. So instead, to speed it up, we can remove the lid, and this is where the beaker comes in. I pour in my volume of water, pour that into my volumetric. Carefully not to spill anything. And as I approach that line, that's when I'm going to go back to my wash bottle. And we always want to make sure that when we're using a volumetric flask, that we keep it at eye level. Okay. Now, because I have not filled it all the way up, at this point, I am going to cap it off. And we're going to go on and shake this, get that salt well dissolved in that amount of water that we've got. Because again, as I mentioned in the previous video, that salt is still going to take up some space. So I made sure to stop far enough below my 100 milliliter mark that I'm not going to overshoot this. Take this, shake. Always keep your thumb over the lid, your hand near the base of it as you're shaking this, so that if it slips out of your hand, you can catch it. If that cap's not on there secure, your thumb is holding it. Okay. So now that I've got my salt dissolved, I can see my meniscus, and I'm going to go back to my wash bottle and always hold this at eye level. And when I've got my meniscus sitting on that line, I have exactly 100 milliliters of salt solution, but I need 200 milliliters. So this is where you bring in a second beaker and you pour off that 100 milliliters of water. And now you would fill this up to 100 milliliters again, add that back on top of the 100 milliliters of salt you already have. And in doing so, you would have your total 200 milliliters of a 0.60 molar solution. If you are making a solution that is in between, most volumetric flasks come in 5, 10, 50, 100, 250, 500, and then 1,000 milliliter sizes. So if you need to make 300 milliliters, you're going to need to use 2 volumetric flasks, 250 milliliter volumetric, and then a 50 milliliter volumetric flask. You would still mass out your salt or whatever your solute is, put that into the larger of the 2 volumetric flasks, so the 250 milliliter, add enough water to get the salt to dissolve, finish filling it up to 250 milliliters, pour that into a collection vessel like a beaker. Then take your smaller volumetric flask of 50 milliliters, fill that up to 50 milliliters, and then add that on top of the 250 milliliters. Stir that solution, and you'd have your 300 milliliters total of solution. So anyway, I'm hoping all this made sense. If not, just leave me a comment, and I will do my best to get back to you. Thanks, and take care.